there is already direct evidence of this link between the $391 million of military aid for Ukraine, and the president's demanding that these political investigations get done. Mick Mulvaney himself admitted that was the case. Gordon Sondland also already testified that he talked to the president, and while the president denied a quid pro quo during the same conversation, he said, but Zelensky has to go to the mic and essentially announce these investigations. But this would be another witness that would corroborate in very direct terms, if this report is accurate, that the president told him unequivocally he was holding up the money until Ukraine did these investigations. It completely blasts another hole in the president's defense. And I think for the senators, and I'm not just talking about the four that have been so much the focus of attention, for every senator, Democrat and Republican, I don't know how you can explain that you wanted a search for the truth in this trial and say you don't want to hear from a witness who had a direct conversation about the central allegation in the articles of impeachment. Because all of these senators on March 17th, when this book comes out, are going to be asked, if they don't support calling him as a witness, why didn't you want to hear from him when he could have given you information before you rendered your verdict? And I just would not want to be in a position of having to answer that question. Well, look, our view is the evidence is already overwhelming, but the president has tried, as you played Mr. Purpura, to contest those facts. And we made this point in our pre-buttal, that is, if they seek to contest any of the allegations here, then they are making the argument for additional witnesses. They're making the argument to call the people that we want to call. And I think the president's false tweets this morning are just a further false exculpatory. He said we didn't try to get his testimony in the House when we did. He said that we claimed that they had no meeting at the United Nations when we showed video footage of them having a meeting at the United Nations. He claimed that he gave them the aid earlier than expected or something along the line, just patently false. When you have essentially the defendant making false statements, it's just further evidence of guilt. But at the end of the day, Allison, this is the test for these senators. They've taken an oath to be impartial. They've just learned there's a key witness going to the heart of the allegations. The question they have to answer is, do they want to hear the truth? Do they want to cross-examine John Bolton? John Bolton, according to the president, is not telling the truth. Well, let's put John Bolton to the test. He's willing to do it. Question is, are the senators willing to hear the truth? So here's the situation, and this is, I think, the reason that John Bolton has offered to testify in the Senate. He's got a book coming out in March. He also does not want to be in the position of withholding this information until his book comes out. Now, that's not an excuse, frankly, for his failure to testify in the House. He should have come to the House. He should not have threatened to sue us if we subpoenaed him. There's no argument that he needed to go to court to get the court to adjudicate this when he has now acknowledged there's nothing classified in what he has to say, and he's put it all in a book. But nevertheless, he's offered to testify now. We're ready to hear his testimony. We'll be pushing again for his testimony, and I think all of the senators are now really hard-pressed to turn him away. Yes. The senators ought to hear this witness firsthand. They ought to evaluate his credibility. The president and his allies are obviously out there attacking him, saying this is not true. The question is, do we believe the president and his not under oath tweets, or are we going to believe John Bolton when he is under oath? And the senators should see that live. I think the American people should see his testimony live. What are they afraid of? Well, I think we know, because they had the manuscript, and now we see why they're desperately trying to prevent him from testifying. And President Trump's claim that the only reason he doesn't want John Bolton to testify, his earlier claim, was because he's protecting the office of the presidency for future presidents. We see now just how shallow and false that pious explanation was. Now we learn that John Bolton took detailed notes, and presumably these are contemporaneous. These notes took place while the events were happening, while they were fresh in his mind. Those, in many respects, are more important than the manuscript. So we ought to not only have John Bolton testify, but we ought to see what he wrote down in his notes at the time. This is a president who accuses me of treason and has accused the whistleblower of treason and said there are ways to treat people. We used to have a way of treating people who are traitors and spies. I don't think there's really much doubt that he wants to at least give the suggestion that the retribution should be of a kind other than at the ballot box. This is, the president's kind of organized crime speak, and that people would tolerate that or not condemn that in a president, just shows how this president has brought down the stature of his office and debased the public discourse. I think it's intended to be personally threatening. I think that's exactly what the president has in mind. And the fact that he would even leave it ambiguous tells you that this is a president who we know has tried to intimidate witnesses and tried to discourage other people from coming forward, like the whistleblower. So sadly, this is part and parcel of the kind of conduct we've seen from this president. The veneer has been torn off. The American people can see the president is clearly trying to hide the truth here. The question is, will the senators participate and help the president, or will they demand to see the evidence, demand to hear the truth before they're asked to render a verdict? And I think that their oath requires them to do so. I guess everyone in the State Department knew that the smear against Ambassador Yovanovitch, which Giuliani continues to this day, and the president as well, was completely false. But the secretary wouldn't issue a statement supporting the ambassador because there was fear the president would undercut the secretary or the department with an angry tweet. And this is, sadly what this administration has become. Fear of all the people who work in the administration, a lot of people outside the administration, of being on the receiving end of one of the president's angry tweets. What I find remarkable about those tapes, those Parnas tapes that have been released in the last few days, is the President of the United States would order an ambassador fired based on the representation of, nothing more than the representation of one of his donors at a dinner. And that the President would operate this way and then make false statements about his even knowing these people, just shows what a continuing danger he poses in that office. We know that from John Bolton and Fiona Hill that Mulvaney was part of this drug deal with Sondland. And so he was clearly in the know about a great deal of this. As Sondland testified, everyone was in the loop. I did find remarkable this, though, that Bolton had a conversation with Attorney General Barr and told Barr that he was brought up in that call. That helps to explain a lot. It helps to explain why Barr's Justice Department tried to keep the whistleblower complaint from Congress. This was not just Barr trying to protect some privilege or some other bogus argument. This was Bill Barr trying to protect Bill Barr.